Welcome to the debate. Picture this for a second. It is 2019. A student walks into the library at the University of Pretoria and, well, they aren't greeted by a human librarian sitting behind a mahogany desk.
Right, of course not.
They are greeted by a machine named Libby. And Libby is this client service robot equipped with over 60 sensors, cameras, and continuous cloud connectivity.
Wow.
Yeah, she processes survey data, navigates the aisles, actively assists with checking materials in and out. It is a striking image of the future. But what happens to Libby when the power grid goes down?
Well, that robot, which costs a small fortune, suddenly becomes a very sophisticated, very heavy paperweight. And that right there is kind of the crux of the whole issue.
Exactly. Today, we are dissecting the rapid integration of artificial intelligence into academic library operations across Africa. We are asking a fundamental question. Is the aggressive adoption of AI technologies, expert systems, robotics, machine learning, an absolute necessity for African academic libraries to survive the fourth industrial revolution?
Or is it a premature, frankly counterproductive push that ignores glaring infrastructural realities while simultaneously destroying the essential human element of library science?
Right. It really comes down to a clash between technological ambition and foundational reality.
It absolutely does.
And my position today is that AI adoption is an indispensable evolution. It is a sine qua non. Automating routine tasks and leveraging machine learning isn't just about flashy robots. It is the only viable way to manage the modern information explosion, reduce critical human error, and ultimately elevate African librarians to higher-level analytical roles.
And my position is that deploying highly sensitive, data-dependent AI in environments that are actively plagued by severe infrastructural deficits, like erratic power grids and inadequate networking, is fundamentally flawed. You simply cannot leapfrog basic infrastructure. Attempting to do so risks alienating users and stripping away the human mentorship that is the actual heartbeat of a university library.
Okay, so let's lay out the framework of why this shift is happening at all. If you think of an academic library purely as a storage facility for physical books, the push for AI seems, excessive.
Sure.
But that is an outdated model. Academic libraries are highly dynamic, service-based organizations that are currently drowning in an unprecedented global information explosion. I mean, we are talking about terabytes of new academic papers, journals, and data sets being published literally every day.
Oh, the volume is staggering, yes.
Right. And the traditional manual processes simply cannot scale to meet that volume. That is where the mechanisms of AI, machine learning, natural language processing, pattern recognition become utterly necessary.
Look, I don't think anyone is denying the theoretical power of natural language processing or machine learning. A neural network's ability to categorize thousands of documents in seconds is objectively impressive.
It is more than impressive, though. It fundamentally changes the output of the institution. We are talking about automating highly repetitive, labor-intensive tasks, taking user statistics, answering basic directional queries, routing reference questions.
Which are all very mundane tasks.
Exactly. And when a system uses machine learning to do that, it doesn't just execute a task. It learns the patterns of the student body. It tracks what disciplines are surging in interest, how peak hours fluctuate. By removing the burden of those routine tasks, human error is drastically reduced. But the real shift is moving from basic data retrieval to what the industry calls Insight as a Service, or IaaS.
Well, Insight as a Service sounds great in a sterile boardroom. But let's break down what that actually means on the ground.
Student coming to the desk asking for a book on macroeconomics and getting a call number. An IaaS system actually analyzes the student's query. It cross-references it with current syllabus requirements across the university and proactively suggests a curated data set of the most cited recent papers in that specific subfield.
Okay.
It provides deep, actionable intelligence, not just raw information. It turns a library into a proactive research partner.
And, if you are an educator listening to this, you might be nodding along thinking that sounds like an incredible asset. But technology cannot simply transcend its physical environment.
How so?
Well, you are talking about algorithms that need to instantly cross-reference syllabi with massive databases. That requires continuous, high-bandwidth connectivity and massive server uptime. You cannot run a data-hungry algorithm on an erratic power grid.
I mean, no, but
The physical infrastructure in many African regions, erratic power supply, poor maintenance culture, inadequate networking, is actively hostile to the deployment of these sensitive systems. So before we even touch on the socioeconomic risks, we have to address the physical wires and electricity. You are essentially building a skyscraper on a swamp.
okay, but let's look at the reality of what is actually happening on the ground, though. Because we aren't just dealing with hypotheticals here. The skyscraper is already being built, and it is standing.
Is it though?
Yes, in 2020, the University of Lagos successfully acquired humanoid client service robots. These machines handle directional queries using sophisticated voice recognition that is directly linked to their cataloging information.
Right, but
Wait, a student asks a question out loud, the NLP parses the audio, queries the database, and gives a real-time answer on resource availability. They even handle surveillance and entry validation. And we already mentioned Libby at the University of Pretoria. This is happening. African institutions are actively utilizing these tools right now.
Sure, Lagos and Pretoria have acquired these robots, but let's interrogate the sustainability of these highly visible initiatives. You mentioned Libby relies on over 60 sensors and continuous Wi-Fi to process her data through the cloud.
She does.
Libby does not have a massive supercomputer inside her plastic shell. She is essentially a local terminal that offloads the heavy processing to cloud servers. So I ask again, how does a robot relying on that level of constant, high-bandwidth cloud connectivity function during a rolling blackout or a regional network outage?
Well, it functions by forcing the institution to adapt its infrastructure.
But when the grid fluctuates, the cloud disconnects, the natural language processor can't parse the audio, the database can't be queried, and the robot just freezes. It begs the question of whether these robots are truly resilient solutions, or if they are just performative tech.
Performative?
Yes. It is very easy to fall into the trap of buying a multi-million naira robot so you look like a 21st century institution while completely ignoring the core operational challenges that actually affect the students.
Look, I understand the hesitation. You are viewing infrastructure as a strict prerequisite. You believe step 1 is a flawless power grid, step 2 is gigabit internet, and only at step 3 do we get to experiment with AI.
That seems logical, doesn't it?
I view it through the analogy of an infrastructure locomotive. Innovation is the engine that pulls the infrastructure forward. Historically, we do not pave thousands of miles of pristine asphalt and then, sit around waiting for someone to invent the automobile. The invention of the car is what forces society to pave the roads.
That is a clever analogy, but a library is not a road.
The mechanism of progress is the same, though. If African academic libraries wait for perfect, uninterrupted power grids and ubiquitous high-speed internet before they adopt machine learning, they will be left decades behind in the global digital literacy race.
I disagree that it's an either-or situation.
But bringing in a robot like Libby forces the university's hand. It demands that the IT department prioritize network stability. It justifies the budget for localized solar arrays or robust battery backups. The innovation forces the environment to catch up.
But let's unpack that car and road analogy a bit further. If a car breaks down on a dirt road, you get a flat tire. It's an inconvenience. If a university library's network fails because they diverted their budget into cloud-reliant robots rather than foundational server resilience,
They aren't mutually exclusive?
thousands of students lose their primary academic support system right in the middle of their exams. A library is a critical support system, not an experimental laboratory for tech evangelism. But let's move past the robots for a second. Libby is flashy. She's the public face. The real brain of this operation, the part that actually manages the information explosion you mentioned earlier, is the back-end data management.
Absolutely. The frontline robots are really just the user interface. The true invisible power of AI in these libraries lies in expert systems. These are interactive, computer-based decision-making tools that use both facts and heuristics to solve complex problems.
And this is where we really need to examine how these machines actually, quote-unquote, think.
Right. Think of how a human cataloger works. They look at a book, assess its subject, cross-reference it with the Dewey Decimal or Library of Congress system, and assign metadata. It is incredibly tedious and highly prone to human clerical error.
Sure.
Expert systems automate this by applying an inference engine to a knowledge base. Tools like Mapper and Catalyst automatically generate machine-readable catalog or MARC records. Systems like ShelfPro ensure materials are accurately classified based on millions of data points, not just one librarian's judgment on a Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, but
We have seen this scale globally with institutions like OCLC, the Online Computer Library Center. By bringing these specific expert systems into African libraries, you can manage massive data sets with highly limited human resources. You achieve a level of consistency that is humanly impossible.
you are presenting these expert systems as infallible, objective oracles. But an inference engine doesn't actually think. It merely executes logic programmed by a human being. It relies on a knowledge base, the inference rules, and the user interface.
Naturally.
If a human programmer writes a heuristic with a bias or makes a fundamental coding error, the expert system doesn't just make a single, isolated mistake. It autonomously replicates that error at an unimaginable scale across your entire bibliographic database in milliseconds.
Every system has risks, but the massive reduction in day-to-day manual clerical error far outweighs the risk of an initial coding error, which, by the way, can be identified and patched.
But it is not just about a typo in a MARC record. Let's look at the mechanism of a tool like Gift Assistant, which is used for accepting or rejecting donated books for collection development.
Okay.
Imagine how this algorithm works. It assesses a donated book based on program variables: publication date, physical condition, duplication status. It prioritizes efficiency. So someone donates a battered, locally printed pamphlet from 1985, containing an incredibly rare oral history of a regional Nigerian community.
Well, the system would flag it based on its parameters.
Exactly. The algorithm's training data, often biased toward Western publishing metrics, where newer and pristine is always better, looks at the 1985 publication date and the poor physical condition, and it mechanically rejects it. It throws that history in the incinerator.
That's a bit dramatic.
A human librarian, however, possesses nuanced, contextual understanding. A human recognizes that this seemingly outdated, worn book has profound cultural significance to that specific university. AI completely lacks the cultural context required for true collection development.
That is a powerful example. But I think it fundamentally misrepresents how these tools are actually meant to be used. The goal of Gift Assistant isn't to operate in a vacuum and automatically incinerate books. It is a filtering mechanism.
A potentially destructive one.
It is designed to quickly process the thousands of irrelevant mass-market textbooks donated every year so that the human librarian isn't buried under a mountain of paper. It clears the noise so the librarian actually has the time to exercise that localized, nuanced judgment on the rare oral history pamphlet, which actually brings us to the most vital part of this whole debate: how AI fundamentally changes the role of the librarian.
I agree that the role of the librarian is changing, but I really question whether it is changing for the better.
It elevates them. AI does not replace the librarian. It frees them from the drudgery of the profession. Let's look at physical library maintenance, one of the most physically taxing, dull, and repetitive jobs in any library's shelf reading.
Which is walking down endless aisles, checking spine labels one by one.
Yes, exactly. Ensuring books are in the correct sequence. It takes hours. Now, look at AROS, the Autonomous Robotic Shelf Scanning System.
The one that uses RFID tracking?
Yes, AROS self-navigates the library at night. It uses radio frequency identification to ping the chips inside the book spines as it rolls down the aisle. It maps the exact coordinates of misplaced books and generates a report by morning. The machine does all the heavy lifting in the dark.
Right.
By delegating that manual labor to a machine, human librarians suddenly have the time and energy for high-level tasks. They have time for policy formulation. They have time to foster STEM outreach. We are seeing libraries pivot toward creating maker spaces.
Meaning physical spaces where students collaborate on tech projects.
Precisely. In these spaces, librarians are teaching children and university students how to code,
how to use 3D printers, and how to program the very robots we are talking about. The librarian transitions from being a silent custodian of dusty books to an active educator of digital literacy. I mean, that is an incredible elevation of the profession.
It is a wonderful ideal, truly. But again, we have to ground this in socioeconomic reality. Let's interrogate the mechanism of RS for a second. You have a robot navigating physical space at night using laser sensors and RFID.
Yep.
How does RS navigate a library in an underfunded university where the physical shelves are massively overcrowded, where books are literally stacked on the floor and the aisles because there isn't enough infrastructure to hold them? The technology assumes a pristine, orderly environment that simply doesn't exist in many of these locations.
The environment can be optimized over time.
But more importantly, let's talk about the human cost. If you are a library administrator operating on a shoestring budget and you purchase a machine that can do the shelf reading of 5 staff members in a fraction of the time, the economic reality is that you are not going to repurpose those 5 staff members to teach coding in a makerspace.
Well,
You are going to lay them off. There is a very real, very tangible threat of job displacement here. In economies where employment is critical, bringing in machines to automate tasks inevitably threatens livelihoods.
the fear of automation causing mass unemployment is older than the Luddites, and historically, technology creates more specialized jobs than it destroys.
We can't just dismiss it as Luddism. And it's not just about the staff losing jobs. Let's look at the psychological impact on the user. You talked about chatbots and NLP handling reference queries. Replacing a human with an AI chatbot at the reference desk creates a profound deficit in empathy.
But a chatbot can answer a directional query in milliseconds. If a student needs to know where is the biology section, they get an instant, perfectly accurate answer. It is incredibly efficient.
Yes, if the question is purely transactional. But reference queries in an academic setting are rarely just transactional. Imagine you are a struggling first-generation university student. You are overwhelmed, you are dealing with severe academic anxiety, and you don't even fully know how to articulate the research question you need help with.
Right?
You approach the reference desk not just looking for a call number, but looking for guidance, reassurance, and mentorship.
Well, a natural language processor can parse the keywords of their request.
But it cannot hear the hesitation in their voice. It cannot read their body language. An AI chatbot completely lacks the human empathy required to understand that this student needs a confidence boost just as much as they need a peer-reviewed article. Removing human interaction from reference services prioritizes mechanical efficiency over profound educational support. It replaces mentorship with cold, transactional responses. We risk turning the library into a vending machine for data.
I hear that concern. I do. Empathy is vital. But I completely reject the premise that efficiency and empathy are mutually exclusive. In fact, they are complementary. Think about the reality of an understaffed reference desk.
Okay.
If a human librarian is forced to answer the exact same transactional question, where is the biology section, 50 times a day, they are exhausted. They do not have the time or the mental bandwidth to sit down and truly mentor that struggling first-generation student.
So the AI acts as a shield, essentially.
Exactly. The AI chatbot handles the 50 transactional queries in milliseconds. It absorbs the routine workload. Because the chatbot is there, the human librarian is sitting right behind the desk, unburdened, and actually has 45 minutes to spend walking that anxious student through their research methodology. AI handles the transactional, so humans have the space to handle the relational.
That is a beautiful synergy. But it completely relies on the assumption that the institution values the relational enough to keep the human librarian on the payroll once the chatbot is installed.
Well, yes.
History shows us that when institutions find a cheaper, automated way to handle frontline services, they cut the staff. They don't magically decide to fund a robust mentorship program. They take the cost savings. That is the socioeconomic risk we simply cannot afford to ignore in this context.
It is a risk, undeniably. And that is exactly why the transition requires robust policy formulation, ethical guidelines for AI deployment, and massive reskilling programs for existing staff. The technology itself isn't the enemy. The implementation strategy is what determines the outcome.
Fair enough.
When we pull back and look at the entire landscape, the staggering data explosion, the robotic frontline services, the back-end expert systems, my position remains resolute. Embracing AI is fundamentally about maximizing human potential within African academia. We must use systems like Mapper and ShelfPro to conquer the insurmountable wave of information. We must utilize robots like Aros to eliminate the drudgery of manual labor. Doing so allows us to redefine the academic library from a static, silent warehouse of decaying paper into a modern, vibrant, proactive center for digital literacy and insight.
And while I am genuinely fascinated by the capabilities of these tools, I maintain that aggressively adopting them while willfully ignoring the foundational reality is a precarious, potentially disastrous path. You cannot build a digital hub if the power grid fails.
Right.
An expert system cannot replace the localized, nuanced cultural judgment of a trained professional, nor should it be allowed to systematically discard our history because of a biased heuristic. The very real threats of systemic malfunctions, the scaling of human coding errors, the socioeconomic impact of job displacement, and the irreplaceable value of human empathy cannot be brushed aside in a rush to appear technologically advanced. We must build the resilient infrastructure first.
Yet, despite our vastly different approaches to the sequencing, the timelines, and the acceptable risks, I think there is a clear point of convergence here. Both of us acknowledge that African academic libraries absolutely cannot remain static.
Oh, I completely agree. Staying exactly as they were in the 20th century is simply not an option. The dynamic, complex information needs of 21st century users demand an evolution. Foundational technologies like mass digitization of physical archives are entirely inevitable and necessary.
Exactly. The complexity really lies in how we thread the needle. How do we balance a fierce, necessary technological ambition with the highly specific, sometimes unforgiving practical realities on the ground? And frankly, we have only scratched the surface today. The discussion surrounding how complementary technologies like cloud computing architecture and platform as a service intersect with library science is vast. I highly encourage everyone listening to dive into the source material for themselves. Examine the data, look at the mechanisms, and form your own conclusions on how African academia should navigate this revolution.
There are absolutely no easy answers here, only complex trade-offs that are going to require incredibly thoughtful, context-aware navigation by the people actually running these institutions.
Which brings us right back to where we started. The library is no longer just a quiet room full of books. It is the central nervous system of the academic world, and it is under immense pressure from the information age. Whether we reinforce that system with the massive processing power of artificial intelligence, or whether we rely on the resilient, adaptive empathy of the human librarian to guide the way, the library of the future is going to be entirely reshaped by the choices we make today.